continuing the subject of the railways and the impact on daily lives of the railways, I will give you two more examples from Full Steam Ahead. The first one is how the greater popularity and cheaper price of coal for heating and cooking influenced daily lives. So, first of all, before the popularization of coal, people normally cooked on open fire or on wood-powered cookers. So, if they had meat, it would be roasted rather than, let's say, baked. If you roast meat over an open fire, wood fire, it gets the flavor from the smoke, from the wood smoke, and it improves the flavor of the meat. It doesn't work this way with coal fire. So the smoke from the coal is quite horrible tasting. So the most popular ways of cooking had to change, and the cookers had to remove the smoke from the fire, from the stove, rather than allow it to infuse the food. So baking rather than roasting became more popular, and also people had to change their pots, and pots and pans became less durable because they would be used touching the heated surface of the stove rather than being held above the burning logs of wood. So that's one thing. Another thing is the clothes and the laundry. When you have coal heating, coal fires, the fireplaces for heating using coal rather than wood, you have more dust and the clothes get dirty more quickly. So you need more to do the laundry more often. And to remove the coal dust, you need to use the soap, more soap. And the soap needs hot water rather than just, let's say, cold or tepid water. It needs hot water. So the way that people started to wash their clothes changed. It was a kind of vicious circle. This is something they noticed in the program, because if you need hot water for laundry, you need to use even more coal, and the kind of circle closes. So that's it. But things like, for example, fish and chips and other convenience foods becoming popular, eating outside, eating in the street. If you were not a working class person just having a short break from work, but you were a middle class person, it was a great excuse. If you were a traveler on the train, you could buy convenience foods such as fish and chips, usually wrapped in an old newspaper. Victorian culture was very, I would say, green. Better, cheaper, fresher food, better quality food stuff. Modernization of farms. Farmers could travel to see agricultural shows with new technologies being presented, new breeds of animals being presented. So that's quite a visible change. The postal service, that was cheap and fast and very reliable, improved greatly with the introduction of the railways. They show a wonderful moment when they actually use a Victorian invention that allowed for dropping and taking on letters, mail, without stopping the train. It's wonderful. It's in I guess it's in episode 4. Watch it, even for this part. It's something that I would say it's better than some of the technologies used today. Something that not many people remember now, the standardization of clocks and time zones. Before the popularization of the railways, so let's say 1840s, different cities in England had different local times, different by 10 minutes, 20 minutes. So it didn't really matter. They were actually based on the positions of the sun, and let's say the sunrise in London was some 10 minutes earlier than the sunrise in Bristol, let's say. So there was an actual time difference between London and Bristol, which didn't really matter in the age of coaches, which would take you a very long time to get from one place to another. But with train timetables, you needed to know which time zone you were using, and this is really something that impacts daily lives. People start paying more attention to time and clocks and measuring time and being punctual. This is a new thing. It's not like come here before noontime, because at noontime you would normally hear a church bell, or perhaps there would be 1 clock in the village on the church spire, and you could see it, and there would be some bell at 12. No, if you had to be somewhere at, let's say, 9:15, you needed a clock or a watch, or somebody to tell you what time it was. So holidays, new division between work and leisure, seaside holidays, traveling, new fashions, traveling within Britain to some fashionable places like Scotland, for example. Scotland becomes quite popular, especially after Queen Victoria and Prince Albert start going there for their holidays in the 1840s. Sports developed. This is all the effect of the railways, and this is really a very visible aspect of new technologies influencing new lifestyles. So if we look at some of the materials from the documentary What the Victorians Did for Us, they noticed the increased pace of life, the speed, the new perception of time. The first experiments with aviation, this is also the 19th century. They did not really have, let's say, air transport yet, but this is one of the areas in which inventors and adventurers would dabble. The end of, I would say, religious thinking, more reliance on science, and some new interests like geology. So you might go to the seaside, but maybe not to just enjoy the walks and the bathing in the sea. We'll talk about that when we talk about Victorian leisure, but to look for fossils. So like intellectual hobbies that would really sometimes have very far-reaching effects, like geology, that really proved that whatever was written in the Bible, that the world was around 6,000 years old, was definitely not true, because the fossilized organisms found even on the Jurassic coast in England were definitely much older. Another aspect of technology influencing daily life is one of the biggest problems of the cities, that is the crowded conditions resulting in a lot of human waste. The great need for new modern sewer systems. This is something that was especially dramatic in London. In 1858, the situation during a hot summer got so bad that the parliament had to block all the windows from the side of the River Thames because there was such a horrible smell. The newspapers called this problem the Great Stink. And the parliament finally decided to assign a lot of money, I guess £3 million or something, to someone who could solve the problem. And here comes another great Victorian, Joseph Bazalgette. Joseph Bazalgette, another great engineer who designed and oversaw the construction of the new, modern, very extensive sewage system in London. Something that was deliberately made much too big for the necessary conditions, so that it still is used. It still is the backbone of the sewer system in London. And some historians say this was probably the greatest engineering achievement in Britain. In the Victorian period. What else? Of course, the developments in medicine, the anesthetics, the antiseptics, the better understanding of what caused diseases. Another name you might want to remember, this time it's an easy name to remember if you like the Game of Thrones, Jon Snow. But not that Jon Snow, Dr. Jon Snow. The young medical doctor who explained the way that cholera was spreading. Because before that, most people believed that epidemic diseases spread through contaminated air. So there was a kind of instinctive connection between epidemic diseases and bad smells, but it wasn't so easy, of course, and especially not in the case of cholera, which was a very dangerous disease that killed a lot of people in Victorian cities. And Jon Snow proved that it was spread not through the air but through contaminated water. During one outbreak, he actually located the well in central London, which was responsible for an outbreak of cholera, and he managed to explain the mechanism of contagion, and so to prevent further outbreaks of this disease. What else? Another kind of human waste in the cities, a kind of human waste, was the dead bodies. People who are dying. What do you do with the dead bodies? In pre-industrial England, well, if you died, you would be buried at your local cemetery. But in big cities, such as London, but also those new industrial cities like Birmingham or Manchester, there were just too many people living in the city centre to have enough burial space near local churches. So what we have is the relocation and the establishment of new big urban cemeteries on the outskirts of cities. There are such cemeteries around London, in many cities. If you think about Warsaw and Powązki, this is the same kind of thinking. So rather than to use a local cemetery near your parish church, you would transport the dead and everything, the whole ceremony, and the graves and the tombstones outside of the city center. This is also a Victorian, I would say, urban innovation. What else do we have? I mentioned the police, so absolutely. The first police force in London appears in 1829, so before Victoria's accession but still in the 19th century. The minister responsible for the creation of the Metropolitan Police Force was Sir Robert Peel, who would later become the Prime Minister, if you remember. And that is why Robert Peel, the police officers are sometimes still called bobbies. This is to commemorate Robert Peel. Before that, there was no police or no professional police. You could hire, let's say, somebody to solve a crime for you if you were robbed of, or if there was some crime against you. You might hire so-called thief catchers to try to solve the crime, to recapture your possessions. But there was no effective police force. In the 19th century, we have that. First in London, then by 1860s, everywhere, all cities had to have their own police force with uniforms and top hats and whistles. This was another new Victorian invention. What else do we have is the social progress. Is really the development of the more comfortable side of city life, such as the urban transport, of course, including the underground. And the first underground line was built in London for the Great Exhibition in 1851. But if we really look at the Great Exhibition, for example, it marks the moment when comfort and pride and kind of complacency starts to be really visible in the urban environment. People want comfort, not just survival, health protection, safe foods, education for children, some pleasant places for leisure, like parks and entertainment venues and department stores, not only to buy things but to make shopping an enjoyable experience. Some of this is strengthened by the government, by the parliament passing new laws, for example, making it obligatory for new houses in the cities to have some sort of waste disposal or to have running water, or forbidding the building of houses from wood. Of course, the fire hazard was here the reason, but also the first compulsory measures towards health protection, such as the smallpox vaccination, the first measures towards universal education for children, rather than tolerating the fact that the children of the working classes had to work from the very early age. So also the laws against food adulteration, so standardization of the quality of food. One aspect of that is also the growing popularization of brands. This is very visible in the food production. You start manufacturers giving the brands and packing their produce in recognizable packages with recognizable names. So you would have consistent quality. You would know that this is not just any tea, let's say, but Lipton's tea, which well, you could hopefully treat as some sort of guarantee of better quality. One of the little things that happen is, for example, the abolition of tax on soap. So even the poor people could afford soap now, and you have all kinds of little inventions in private homes, in the kitchen, in the bathroom. Things like first refrigerators. Still, they weren't very popular, but the first attempt to construct refrigerators. All kinds of little labor-saving devices. Knife sharpeners and graters and choppers, they mostly come from the 19th century. One of the things that they mention in this documentary, What the Victorians Did for Us, is an invention from the late 19th century of safety razors with disposable blades. So they were safer, you weren't as likely to cut yourself badly while shaving. But those disposable blades invented by a guy with the name Gillette, this is Gillette, of course, they come from this. He was of French origin. They were the very first thing made, produced and sold with the intention of being thrown away. So you use them a few times. When they become blunt, you do not sharpen them like you would with old razors, but you remove just the blade, replace it with a new sharp one, and dispose of the old one. This was the very first disposable product, those extra blades for safety razors. Now, of course, if you think about it, we have so many disposable things. Victorian culture did not have it. Everything had to be reused. Everything had to be recycled. Not that they knew anything about ecology, but they were very economical with the money. That's really the reason. So we continue in a moment.